Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
I want to ask you a question. Did you know Ben Rich?
No, but I talked to people who did. Now, I'll tell you what Ben Rich had to do with this. First of all, do you know where he was born? Ben Rich was one of the most the biggest Mossad spy in the United States. I mean, he got the most classified information. Here's what happened. Here's how we got messed up with Israel. In 1947, when Israel became a state, I keep saying Anslinger. It's not Anslinger. James Angleton was chief of CIA in Rome. Okay, they sent Angleton down to Tel Aviv along with some guys at MI6 to form Mossad. And for some reason, however it happened, James Angleton got allied with Mossad like this forever. He was the mole. If you remember, in 1960, he was the head CIA director of foreign intelligence, and he was the guy that always was looking for the Russian mole. He was the Russian mole because, you know, he was so friends with Mossad, he'd tell Mossad stuff, and Mossad would pass it on to Russia. So when David Ben-Gurion, in the summer of 1963, said, you know, we have to kill Kennedy. We have to. I'm tired of him threatening us with inspecting Dimona. It's none of his friggin' business. I don't want to hear any more from Kennedy. You kill him. He gave that order to Mossad, and then resigned, so that he couldn't be held responsible for it. Mossad then went to Angleton. The Kennedy assassination was not a CIA job, but it was greased by the CIA only because Angleton was in there with his buddies at Mossad. And he's the one that greased the skids for everything that happened in Dealey Plaza and the escape and everything. They were Corsican sharpshooters there, hired by Mossad. They pulled off the whole thing, and everybody says, well, you know, they think the mob killed Kennedy, or maybe Johnson did, or Castro. It wasn't. It was Israel, and the reason they did is because David Ben-Gurion didn't want any more inspections of Dimona, and that's all.
And that's their nuclear. It's where they do their nuclear.
That's where they
get
their nuclear bombs with plutonium they stole from us,
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice.
قتل بن-غوريون كينيدي بسبب قرار كينيدي وضع مفاعل ديمونا تحت الرقابة لمنع إنتاج أسلحة نووية.
أصبح بن-غوريون هو الذي قتل كينيدي الآن؟
بن-غوريون أصدر أمر باغتيال كينيدي، وأنا مسؤول عن كل كلمة. وتحالفت الموساد مع المافيا الأمريكية، وبعد ما أوزوالد قتل كينيدي أرسلوا له موساد اسمه روبي يهودي قتله، وقتلوا الموساد 22 شاهد من الشهود، وأغلق الملف. وأنا أتحدى
وهو ما زال مغلقا لحد الآن.
أتحدى أن ينشر الملف لحتى الآن رغم مرور السنين ما نشر بضغط صهيوني يهودي.
System which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
عندما كان يتكلم عن إيران برنامجها النووي لابد أن تكون أمام ديمونة بكل تأكيد، لكن لما تكون قدام ديمونة لابد أن يكون قدامه مصير سلفه كندي. كندي الذي قرر أن يفتش مفاعل ديمونة، وأصر على تفتيشه ليتأكد من أنه يصنع أسلحة ذرية وإلا لا. ورفض الإسرائيليون، وأخيرا أصر هو على التفتيش. كان المخرج من هذه الأزمة هو استقالة بن غوريون. استقال حتى لا يوافق على تفتيش مفاعل ديمونة، وأعطى الضوء الأخضر بقتل كندي. وهكذا قتل كندي بسبب مفاعل ديمونة وإصراره على تفتيشه. بسبب إصراره على تفتيشه قتل كندي. لابد أن أوباما أمام هذه الصورة، وبالتالي لابد أنه كان يريد أن يتكلم على هذا ولكنه يتراجع.
From the day of its founding, Israel had a lot of enemies. It was clear to Ben-Gurion the Arabs would continue to fight against the new Jewish state. By his reckoning, the Arabs would only need to win once to destroy Israel, but Israel would have to win every war in order to survive. Ben-Gurion knew a nuclear bomb could turn the tide. In 1948, that goal was still out of reach, but the Prime Minister would pursue it by any means possible. Ben-Gurion has two allies who share his vision. Ernst David Bergman, a brilliant chemist who fled Nazi Germany, and Shimon Peres, who still influences Israeli politics to this day. They share the conviction that the bomb can be built. They want Israel's talented scientists to help ensure the existence of the state. But Israel does not possess uranium. Intensive prospecting in the Negev desert has yielded close to nothing. In 1955, Israel finally has an opportunity to obtain uranium. A conference takes place in Geneva called Atoms for Peace. Eisenhower offers the participating nations nuclear technology if they promise not to use it to build nuclear weapons. At that time, civilian nuclear energy was seen as a hope for mankind.
Israel signed on to the Atom for Peace from documents that we have, started to explore the possibility of whether that kind of start can be used to create an option with military implications.
But the research reactor at Nahal Sorek proves unsuitable for the production of plutonium. It's a bitter disappointment for the Israelis. The reactor, built with the US aid, will later be used to distract attention from the nuclear program's true goal. Israel starts looking for a different partner for developing nuclear weapons. It's a task for the country's best negotiator.
Tout a commencé en 1952. It
all began in Paris in 1952 with the arrival of a certain Shimon Peres, director of the Israeli Ministry of Defense and an employee of Ben-Gurion. The goal of this cooperation was to gain as many weapons and as much know-how from France as possible.
De la France.
Ben-Gurion and his envoy know that France is also planning to develop a nuclear bomb. Shimon Peres hopes to gain access to this program. He's a welcome guest in Paris.
Beaucoup d'hommes politiques donc ont été séduits, véritablement.
It must be said that there were a lot of politicians who were seduced. Really seduced by Peres. Within 2 years, starting in 1954 or 1955, Shimon Peres became such an important person that his office was moved to the French Ministry of Defense.
France and Israel share a deep mistrust of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, the new hope of the Arab world. In 1956, he nationalizes the Suez Canal, which was until then owned by Britain. the former colonial power refuses to accept the situation and, along with France and Israel, wants a war. The plan is for Israel to attack. Then Britain and France will occupy the Suez Canal under the pretense of restoring peace.
(1956) saw the collusion between Israel, France and England. It was a conspiracy.
But the Western powers' plan fails. The United Nations, led by the US, preempt them by marching in as a regulatory force. Britain and France have lost. They are no longer involved in the power struggle in the Middle East. But it all pays off for the third ally, Israel. Britain supplies it with heavy water and uranium. The United Kingdom has had the atom bomb since 1952. And France helps Israel build a nuclear plant in the Negev desert. It will help the country get weapons-grade plutonium. But the Israelis don't know they're being observed by US spy planes.
Near Beersheba, in an open area, in a desert area, all of a sudden we see them pouring a lot of concrete. I made the first briefing board and labeled it Beersheba, possible nuclear installation under construction. And my boss took it to brief Eisenhower. And Eisenhower, after Lundahl briefed him, he just pushed it aside.
The reconnaissance photos surprise Brugioni. They show facilities similar to ones he's seen in aerial shots from France, where the US is also using spy planes.
All of a sudden, the reactor at Dimona, we renamed the place Dimona, it started taking on the same characteristics as the reactor at Mercoul. So I made a twofold briefing board. On one side, it opened up. On one side was French Mercoul photographs, and on this side was the Israelis. And proof without a doubt that the French had some connection with the Dimona installation. So Lundahl took it over to brief President Eisenhower, and President Eisenhower again pushed it aside.
The CIA wants to find out more, so it sends agents disguised as tourists to the Negev desert. This is some of the film taken by the CIA agents. For years, it remained undiscovered in a US archive. The agents wanted to find out what was being built with the huge amounts of concrete and who was sitting in the dozens of buses stopping in front of the facility each day. The American spies also report that the area around the facility is full of Mossad agents.
Well, the Israelis got really touchy. In fact, they roughed up one of our attachés when he tried to drive up to the area. And they were very sensitive too. They were tailing our cars.
Film shot by the CIA agents shows that hundreds of French workers are employed at Dimona. They're housed in newly built settlements nearby. It's clear to the American spies that there's a secret Franco-Israeli nuclear weapons program. French President Guy Mollet and his defense minister, Maurice Bourges-Monory, are pulling the strings.
Il s'est constitué petit à petit un petit club.
Gradually, they developed a secret circle, an exclusive club. Only those people, and not even members of the government, knew what was happening there. There were 20 or 30 members. Both countries were allied at the highest and most secret level. In other words, it was a kind of plot. And it's important to note that there was no official decision. We were supposedly a state of law, in which the parliament was theoretically very powerful. But parliament never approved these things.
to change the date or to write the date some hours or a day before, just to make it valid, even though the cabinet, the government that signed the contract already essentially lost power in a vote of no confidence.
Israel's negotiator, Shimon Peres, is even able to obtain a contract for their help in building the bomb. He collaborates with the club and stretches the limit of what's legal. He's determined to reach his goal.
Shimon Peres was able, in a way, to... This just show how much Shimon Peres was determined to get it, to bring it home, and virtually all the means were kosher just to get that, because the ultimately objective seems sacred in the eyes of Peres, in the eyes of Ben-Gurion, and in the eyes of those very few who were involved in that.
Israel has taken a huge step on its road to getting the bomb. The decisions in Israel and France are made outside of those countries' democratic institutions, although their effects are far-reaching for their citizens. Israel misleads the rest of the world about its true intentions.
The Israelis were denying that they had anything in this area. In fact, Shimon Peres said there was a textile mill under construction. It wasn't anything important.
But when Charles de Gaulle becomes president of France in 1958, the country's foreign policy changes drastically. The new leader wants the nuclear bomb for France, not Israel.
Was not immediately informed of the nuclear activities. It took 1.5 years until he'd been brought fully up to speed. Why wasn't he informed? Because the members of the club were in the political system, and they did all they could to reveal only a small part of what they knew.
Israel. It takes a while before de Gaulle can implement his new policies, however, and for a long time he is unaware of what's going on behind the scenes.
General de Gaulle ne va pas être prévenu tout de suite.
General de Gaulle
de donner que des bouts d'informations.
Ben-Gurion remains undeterred, despite the new political line from Paris. The Israelis still lack launching systems for their nuclear weapons, especially missiles. They know they have to hurry before things change too much in France.
Le Général de Gaulle va décider.
Then General de Gaulle decided to shut down the whole thing. But his orders were not carried out immediately on all levels. There were hurdles everywhere, because the club was strongly represented in the army and the administration, and was involved in politics. In other words, even General de Gaulle couldn't enforce his orders. The club's methods were shrewd. Every time a decision was made, the club counteracted it with all its might.
One example is the MD-620 missile. It was developed by the French defense contractor Dassault for Israel, even though officially there was no longer any cooperation. It later serves Israel as a launching system for nuclear weapons. But despite those supplies, Israel's relationship with France cools considerably. However, support soon comes from another source. Germany's Chancellor Konrad Adenauer is already supplying weapons to Israel. A document shows that he pledged 200 million marks to Israel annually for 10 years, starting in 1961. The negotiations were about what was referred to as a nuclear desalinization plant. No further details are known. The files about the secret corporation remain classified to this day. Intelligence about the secret in the Negev desert is starting to leak out. That fuels speculation about Israel's possible nuclear weapons program. The political pressure is mounting. The focus of most attention is the nuclear reactor in Dimona, supposedly a textile mill. Can the Israelis produce weapons-grade plutonium there? In 1961, John F. Kennedy becomes President of the United States. Israel soon realizes there's resistance now from Washington too. Kennedy will try harder than any other US president to prevent Israel from getting the bomb.
At times it came also almost to confrontation. One time under President Kennedy, when he pressed very hard for American bilateral access to Dimona in order to ensure that Israel would not be able to reach nuclear weapons capability, in order to halt proliferation in the eyes of Kennedy in the Middle East. Ultimately, Israel prevailed in that kind of confrontation, but the confrontation was a tough one. The public knew very, very little about it.
Kennedy demands that Israel allow inspections in Dimona. He wants to make sure they're not working on nuclear weapons. He threatens to withdraw all US economic aid unless Jerusalem agrees. Israel relents. At least, it appears so.
À cause de la pression américaine, les Israéliens ont accepté une inspection de la commission.
The Americans put on enormous pressure. So Israel agreed to an inspection of the reactor by the US Atomic Energy Commission. Theoretically, it was a research reactor, and not a reactor that could produce plutonium. So over several months, the Israelis built a control center that had nothing to do with reality. Behind this control center sat engineers and scientists who had programmed everything in case the Americans wanted to inspect the controls. They had made sure the data shown corresponded to those of a civilian reactor. In truth, Dimona serves only one purpose. It's a laboratory for plutonium and nuclear weapons. Publicly, the Israelis swear that it's a civilian project, but President Kennedy knows better.
And Kennedy very much wanted to see the non-proliferation treaty signed. So he put pretty brutal pressure on Ben-Gurion. And as part of that campaign, he also, for the first time, agreed to provide Israel with weapons. Because Ben-Gurion told Kennedy, indirectly, of course, not face-to-face, look, if you want us to give up our nuclear program, we need other weapons to defend ourselves. So Kennedy agreed to provide Israel with Hawk anti-aircraft missiles. And what did Israel do with those missiles? Put them around the reactor in Dimona.
John F. Kennedy is assassinated in 1963. Under his successor, Lyndon B. Johnson, America develops its friendship with Israel. From now on, the US will no longer look so closely at what's happening in Dimona. The Arab states led by Nasser, as well as the Soviet Union, make more decisive calls for Israel to end its nuclear weapons program. They don't believe Israel's protestations.
No expenditure is questioned, no secret is revealed. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.